Would you be capable of cooking the very last meal of your life, looking into your only child's eyes, knowing you both are about to starve, and in that final second, giving that last bite to a complete stranger? Today, we are going to explore one of the most extreme, raw, and deeply moving stories of antiquity, the story of the Widow of Zarephath, the woman who fed a prophet with her son's final morsel of food. It is an absolute chronicle of survival explained in just a few minutes based on real biblical sources and the harsh historical context that traditional theology rarely mentions. To truly understand the void in this woman's stomach, you have to understand the weight of the crisis. As recorded in the Old Testament, specifically in the first book of Kings, chapter 17, the prophet Elijah had unleashed a terrifying prophecy upon King Ahab. No rain or dew would fall on the land for years. Imagine the ground cracking open like broken glass, rivers turning into trenches of black dust, livestock collapsing under a merciless sun. This wasn't just a shortage, it was a total societal and climatic collapse. In the midst of this apocalypse of thirst, God gives Elijah an incomprehensible command. Go to Zarephath, a foreign city, for I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. Elijah wasn't sent to a wealthy merchant. He was sent to the most vulnerable person in the entire system.
The first book of Kings, chapter 17, verse 10, relates that when Elijah reached the gate of the city, he saw a widow gathering sticks. She had no servants, no land. She was completely alone. Elijah, his lips cracked from the journey, calls out a simple yet agonizing request during a severe drought. Please bring me a little water in a cup so I may drink. Showing incredible compassion despite her misery, she turns to fetch the water. But right at that moment, the prophet drops the real bombshell. Please bring me also a piece of bread in your hand. Can you imagine the psychological pressure of that moment? Asking for water was asking for life. Asking for bread in the middle of the worst famine in history was asking for a miracle or signing a death warrant. This is where the narrative breaks anyone's heart. In verse 12 of that same chapter of 1 Kings, the woman stops, looks at the prophet, and speaks the rawest truth a human being can utter. As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. This mother was not exaggerating. She had the exact amount of flour that fits in the palm of a hand, just enough oil to moisten it. She had already accepted death. Her plan for that afternoon was to light one last fire, cook one final cake of bread, hold her son close as they chewed the last remnants of food, and wait for starvation to stop their hearts. Does this sound unbelievable? Then wait until you hear the next part, because what comes next defies all human logic. If this story is gripping you and you want to discover more hidden secrets of ancient history, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Let's move on. What Elijah replies in verse 13 is, to any sane person, an act of extreme cruelty or madness. The prophet tells her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make something for yourself and your son. Put yourself in that mother's shoes. A man you don't know, who serves a God that is not the official deity of your nation, asks you to take the very last bite out of your malnourished child's mouth to feed him first. He didn't ask for leftovers. He demanded the first portion. The emotional and cultural shock here is devastating. Elijah was measuring the size of her trust, not with words, but with her own child's stomach.
The Bible records in verse 14 the prophet's promise. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. The woman went and did exactly as Elijah told her. She broke every protective maternal instinct. She baked the bread, watched the steam rise, and handed it over to the stranger. And here is where the fracture of physical reality occurs. When she went back to look at the jar, the handful of flour was still there. She reached her hand in the next day, and the flour was still there. She tipped the jug of oil,
and the golden drops kept flowing. For months, 3 people lived off a jar that mathematically should have been empty in 5 minutes. The multiplication didn't happen at a massive public banquet. It happened in the quietness of a humble, dark kitchen.
But the story does not end with a fairy tale happy ending. The mystery becomes much denser and more disturbing. Sometime later, as narrated in verse 17, the widow's son grew ill. The illness became so severe that, the source states textually, he stopped breathing. The boy died. Imagine the psychological breaking point of this woman. What was the use of saving him from starvation if death was just going to claim him in a bed anyway? She confronts Elijah with a heartbreaking cry. "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and to kill my son?" She thought the miracle of the flower was just a divine trap to keep them alive, only to punish her in a more agonizing way later. Can you feel the desperation of that mother holding the cold body of her miracle? Leave a comment below. Do you think this was a fair test or an act of cruelty? Don't go anywhere, because the ending shatters the boundaries between life and death. Elijah takes the lifeless body of the boy from his mother's arms, carries him up to the upper room where he was staying, and lays him on his own bed. In verse 21, a striking and deeply physical prophetic ritual is described. Elijah stretched himself out on the boy 3 times. He cried out desperately to God, groaning in the darkness of the room. "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." This is not a passive prayer. This is hand-to-hand spiritual warfare against physical death. The sacred text affirms that the Lord heard Elijah's cry. The boy's life returned to him, and he revived. When Elijah walks down the stairs and hands the living boy back to the widow, she utters a phrase that echoes to this day. "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." She had to see the flower multiply to survive, but she had to see death retreat to truly believe. At the end of the day, the story of the Widow of Zarephath is not just a tale of ancient miracles. It is a brutal anatomy of the human condition when facing absolute lack. It teaches us that sometimes, to receive the unexpected, we must be willing to let go of the very last thing we hold on to completely empty our hands. It speaks to our deepest fear of losing what we love and our capacity to trust when everything around us says we are going to die. If this journey into the desert and the forgotten miracles of antiquity touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to leave a like, share this video with someone who needs faith today, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming historical and spiritual investigations. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in that mother's place? See you in the next video.